Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is March the 20th. 2020. That's a lot of 2020s there. Strong hand, long-term thinking. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. Offended by selling. 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. All right, dudes. It's been wild. Compete, don't complain. Hello, my elite friends. We got an elite cast here today, and they're all in motion. We got Andy Hoffman, we got Christian, and we got Brad Mills coming in from Canada. How is everybody today in the chat? I just refreshed a few things. Ken Bozak sent $4.20. Stay healthy, bro. Well, it looks like Brad is trying to stay healthy there. Can everybody see? He's got a unique beast type of outfit on there. I haven't really seen that too often on the streets. Anyway, Brad, what's up in Canada?
I'm coming to you live from the quarantine zone here in Strathroy, Ontario. Active outbreak of coronavirus happening. I got my Satoshi Run hat.
All right, dude. Rip that thing off so the people can hear you, man. Pound that like button, everybody. Pound that like button.
Okay,
all right.
You got to shave your beard if you want to wear a mask because it creates a proper seal. So that's why I have no beard.
All right, dudes. Brad, tell us about, linked to below, or all these guys are linked to below, but Brad had a prediction article out. And we're going to talk about the traditional finance markets. We're going to talk about precious metals too. We got a guy who used to deal with precious metals here. One of these.
Great.
Yeah, I think it was Christian used to be a big precious metals guy. But so Brad, what give us some of your predictions that you had in your article linked to below.
Yeah, well, okay, so about not quite a week ago, 14th of March. So what's that? 6 days ago, almost a week ago. I had some thoughts on selling Bitcoin, and not just Bitcoin, but most things. And I wrote this little brainstorm stream of consciousness prediction article because I was getting asked by a lot of people, like, why are you bearish on Bitcoin? Isn't Bitcoin going to win in this scenario where they're printing trillions of dollars? And I was of the camp that while Bitcoin gains long term from this, Bitcoin is not a hedge against the pandemic that's going to cause a collapse in the stock markets. And I think we may have even talked about that last time I was on. I felt like the profile of the investor that's in Bitcoin is not the same as it was during the other waves of HODL. After 2017, we got a lot of new investors, and they are also investing in stocks, and they're investing in other assets. They're more sophisticated investors. So when everything starts to sell, they're going to sell their Bitcoin. And so while the holders may not sell, like the new entrants, which made up quite a bit of the money in the bubble in 2017, they're going to get panicked because everything's selling off, and they're going to sell everything. So I had some short-term predictions, which kind of mostly all came true already over 2 weeks, and then I had some medium-term predictions and some long-term predictions. Just a general way of how I'm thinking about how to position yourself and not to get blown up during
let's
volatile time.
Specifically talk about the medium-term ones because those are very interesting to me.
Yeah, so like the medium-term, well, there's medium to long. So I'll say the medium-term ones, things that I thought that I saw like foreshadow speech that Trump and the advisors were doing, and even in Canada, what Trudeau was saying. Things like UBI style checks, because this is, I don't know how much of this I'm just preaching to the choir or not, but basically we're in a different phase of life now. This mask is a joke right now, but it's probably not going to be. I'm in a city where there's actually an outbreak of coronavirus happening. It's 20,000 people right now, and I was trying desperately to make this small town not turn into like an overwhelmed hospital system. So I was like sounding the alarm locally, and 3 days after that, they declared a state of emergency and they shut everything down. So we're in quarantine. self-isolation, not quarantine. We're not supposed to be moving around. And I started talking to different investors, different business owners, and just to see how quickly it affected their business. And it started to make me realize, like, this is going to really drastically affect the economy, because it's a ripple through from, you have to stay home from work. Then your employer doesn't know what the hell to do. So are they supposed to keep you? Are they supposed to fire you? So you got 1,000 employees. How are you supposed to manage that as an entrepreneur? The government announces some stimulus. They're going to try to help you. They'll do some EI. In Canada, we have employment insurance, so they'll help there, but it's not enough. People are going to stop shopping. People are going to be home. People are going to not pay their rent, their mortgage. Real estate prices eventually are going to go down, and as the markets keep going down, it's going to be downward pressure for every asset pretty much until this thing sort of bottoms out, which I don't think is going to happen for months. And I saw, like, they were willing to pull the stops and do whatever they possibly could, which means I think they're going to print $20 trillion. But now that actually sounds like it's a little bit on the low side. A week ago, when I was thinking they were going to print $20 trillion, that's nearly doubling the debt in like a year. But they're going to do that in like a month now. They just announced today that they're going to do $1 trillion repo operations every day for the rest of this month. They've already done like $4 trillion in printing and stimulus. So we're almost $15 trillion by the end of this month. So, and you can stop me anytime here. I got a lot.
I was all right. I'll get to Andy. He's talking about the money. The money printing is on. The printing press is going wild. This is like the culmination of all your work, Andy. You said before. What do you think's going on here?
Right. Well, that was the name of my article yesterday. But anyone who knows, I've been, I got into the sound money and precious metals in 2002, and I've been talking about the whole thing for 20 years. And I'm as well known in Bitcoin as I am in precious metals, and also that my views have changed. Obviously, that I used to think precious metals were what was going to save us, and now in a world of Bitcoin, you realize just how comical that is. Precious metals are dead, and you need to embrace the future. Now, what Brad's talking about is, this is an unprecedented situation. Certainly for anyone alive now, I'm sure there have been situations deep in the past where you've had shutdowns of business. I guess during World War I and II would be about the best scenario I can, comparison I can make. But then again, we were on.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, no, it'll come back. It keeps going up. We didn't have the debt capacity. We had the debt capacity that we don't have now. And when 2008 came around, obviously, that was a clarion call to the world, at least anyone who's watching, that the fiat system was in trouble. It started in 1971 when we went off the gold standard. And the way I put it, it permanently broke. But what they did was they created all these new measures to keep the game going between QE and NERP and ZERP and 24/7 market manipulation. And what did it do? It bought us 12 years of exponential debt growth and bad practices and capital misallocation, which led us to a point where we were just a balloon waiting for a pin. And no one could have expected what it would be, just like no one expected a 9/11. Well, no one expected that it would be a virus pandemic. And right now, to me, the world is economically toast. All the things that have been built up all these years that I've been talking about all of these years are going to burst. They're bursting as we speak. It's what Brad's talking about. They will, print. I don't even want to use the word money. They're going to print fiat, whatever, into oblivion, and all it's going to do is devalue it further. Right now, we're seeing record collapses of fiat currencies around the world. We're seeing record collapses of stocks. I mean, the stock market has now fallen more than during the 1929 crash, and this is just in 2 weeks. We've seen an historic drop in real interest rates, and it's only going to get worse. The one thing, and actually, everyone should read what Brad wrote. I just read it for the first time, and I think it's great because what he's predicting the playbook. The current playbook for the government is to print into infinity, and then I agree, shut down the markets, shut down everything, because they think that's their last gasp. So be ready. Be ready for markets to be shut down. I think that we're going to be indoors for a long time, and the beauty of it all is that, to me, I've been talking forever about, for instance, precious metals. Among the fact that it's not divisible or fungible or any of the things that make Bitcoin special. The precious metal system depends on logistics. So precious metal dies too, even worse if there's logistics issues. And of course, if you're closing down market stocks, bonds are going to be worthless. And so what'll be left? Bitcoin, which if you hold your private keys. And I think it's an absolutely amazing thing to hold Bitcoin now, because while everyone was selling everything, as Brad was saying in the initial stages, in Bitcoin, we're only starting with $1 billion market cap, and now it was the short-term stuff. We know on the blockchain, almost everything that was sold was the short-term stuff, and of course, you have this ridiculous BitMEX, which allows 100-to-1 leverage on Bitcoin. You got to be nuts to do that. So now you're down to 100 billion market cap. So I think, frankly, most of who's going to sell is sold already. You could have a little more down, but I don't think there's really a lot more left that's not hodlers. And Bitcoin is going to be the most functioning system of all the financial assets out there. So I think that the world is going to be in for some serious scares. Hopefully not the worst case scenario. And I think right now, honestly, the only asset from a risk reward standpoint I can even imagine holding is Bitcoin.
Woo! Pound that like button, people. Okay, Christian, you're nodding your head. You want to get in
I
on
might
this,
have
baby.
to disagree on that. We'll talk after that. I just sold some Bitcoin about 4 hours ago.
Yes, and I was going to actually talk about your weekend in a second, but let's go to Christian. He's chopping at the bit there. Take it over, baby.
Well, I'm glad that Andy brought up the analysis done by several organizations on the blockchain, showing the historic dump last week was really new coins for the most part. I put out a tweet last week saying that this incredible redistribution from weak hands and new hands to dedicated hodlers is incredibly bullish compared to the stock market. If you look at the stock market, all the stops are being pulled to manipulate that and stop it from dumping. It's still dumping. Bitcoin is really, a free market money. It's really taking it on the chin, and I think it's performing incredibly well. And if the people that bought Bitcoin last week are in fact strong hands, are in fact hodlers of last resort, I would not be shocked to see Bitcoin really start to perform well in the medium term. It's difficult to say in the short term just because there's so much uncertainty. A lot of people are getting furloughed. A lot of companies are starting to seize up because business is completely stopped. They have people on payroll. Like, if you're an office manager, offices are shutting down. Like, just think of the office managers, right? And then, what are the fractals beyond that? Like, so many companies are really starting to shut down right now. And while they wait for stimulus, while they wait for a package from the government, this is when they've been shut down for, 2 to 3 weeks. Business has been affected for 2 to 3 months. These businesses are having a tough time. And I don't know. I'm bullish in the medium term, but in the short term, I think anything can happen. Anything is on the table. The panic has yet to start. I don't mean a fearmonger, but I think that's just the reality.
No, if I could add, you should be fear mongering because it's the wise thing to do. It's wise for people to be indoors. It's wise for businesses to shut down because we don't know what we're up against. But the thing is, with we're talking about Bitcoin versus other markets. These stock markets globally are worth what, $200 trillion. Bonds, $200 trillion, foreign currencies, $80 trillion, these incredible numbers. And they're also all overvalued based on, these perfect scenarios and based on all the stimulus and market support. So there's trillions to come out of these markets. Whereas in Bitcoin, it's only 100 billion market cap to start with. And most of that, as we saw, is in the hands of hodlers. So even if you say, well, everyone's going to sell Bitcoin because they need money, it's just not that much money. And it's not like there's big businesses that hold Bitcoin that needed to pay the bills. I just don't think there's that much market cap in Bitcoin to come off of these levels, let alone with the halving coming as all of this is happening. So, I mean, yeah, of course it can go down some, but I think most of the damage has already been done.
Oh, we're going to talk about that halving. And again, Christian did bring up something I brought up earlier in the week, that the people that did sell, most of the Bitcoin that sold, had been purchased in the last year or so. The Bitcoin that didn't move, people, the old Bitcoin did not move much when the big sell-off happened. Was it last week or whatever it was? Brad, you want to say something? You sold Bitcoin. You actually sold.
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
So
Yes.
I was taking a lot of shit on Twitter for 3 weeks because when I was following this coronavirus news coming out of China, because my wife is immune compromised and I'm very sensitive. I mean, I ordered like hazmat suits and all this stuff in the end of January because I was ready to self-quarantine once this sniff of this thing came around my local area because she can't catch it because her mortality rate for her immune compromised condition is too high for me to risk it. So I started to pay more attention to it, and then it started to make me realize, well, this isn't just going to stop at China. This is going to hit the U.S. This is going to hit everywhere. And in that scenario, Bitcoin, even though I think it's great long term, and it's like I'm a Bitcoiner, and I'm an evangelist since 2011, and believe in it as the best asset. But Jesus Christ, like I was just looking at those signs and I just thinking, why am I going to hold this? I did this already when the crash happened in 2018. I was like, yeah, well, I'm a hodler and like weak hands and all that stuff. And I was just like, why am I going to put myself through that again? I was just getting like seething back pain. And I just started realizing my logic is telling me I got to sell some down to avoid the risk of drawdown. But my emotional activism side was like fighting against my urge to want to sell, and it was just like 2 weeks of me debating like, I think this is going to crash the stock markets, guys. Like, what should I do? And try to ask Twitter, and then everybody tell me, don't do anything, hold, buy more, all this stupid.
No,
advice.
you did the right thing. I sold some Bitcoin in late 2018. I had set stops at the Hoffman line, and I publicly said this is what I did and why, for personal financial reasons. Just like you did. I mean, everyone has their own financial reasons to do things, and shame on the Bitcoin community when it gets mad at people for doing what it doesn't want them to do. You do what you need to do, and I do what I need to do, and we all agree that Bitcoin is the best asset to hold. We don't all necessarily agree when it's going to make moves up or down. I have my,
what I realized,
and then so do you,
Brad. I realized. Go ahead, Adam. Are you going to say something?
No. You were saying. I was encouraging you to keep talking, Brad.
So I was getting conflicted about it because I feel like I'm like a hodler of last resort for a certain percentage of my stash. There's some Bitcoin I have that I will never sell, and I always, I will always hold that. But then as I started to, I don't know, think about it some more and listen to my body telling me like the stress pains of holding Bitcoin is not worth it. The gains the moon gains I might have on that percentage that I would have sold, it felt better, it slept better at night. I started to just realize that most of the people on Twitter are in their hodler journey and they haven't yet hit their goal. They haven't accumulated their 6.15 Bitcoins or whatever their number is. And I started realizing, oh, wait a second, I'm like trying to give advice for people that aren't in my situation, and I'm listening to these people that have like these hazard logos or whatever in their name, and they're actually not getting the joke that's you're not supposed to be toxic. You're just toxic. Toxic was like a self-deprecating joke from when altcoiners would call us toxic. But now these Bitcoiners are getting toxic at other Bitcoiners for wanting to sell some. But it's really all about risk management. You gotta like, don't be overexposed to anything. Don't blow yourself up. I mean, there's a percentage of my portfolio I will never sell in Bitcoin. I'll always keep it, even if it goes to zero.
You talked about that. You said that you sold, it was a few weeks ago, but you just had a tweet today that you sold too. So what was up with that?
So I bought Bitcoin after I wrote a Medium article about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago in 2018, and I said I was going to buy all the way down to $3,800. That was like when it hit 3,800, I was like, that's a buy opportunity. And I bought like around 5,000 on the way down. I bought around 38 or something like that. And then I said right in the article, I was going to hold this for 1 to 2 years minimum. And it like pretty much right to the dot, I didn't sell at 13,000 and I came down, and then it went back up to 10,500. And I'm like, seeing coronavirus come, I'm like, I gotta offload some of this because I want to have cash, because everybody's going to fly to cash. And then I want to buy the dip when there is a dip. And if there's no dip, I didn't stress, and I have some cash, and I'll go buy a house or something like that instead when real estate crashes.
Well, first of all, most people in the Twitter community don't have much Bitcoin. They just like to talk, and the people who do the most talking are the people who are the least influential. So I've dealt with this in precious metals and Bitcoin, everything. People just attack you for whatever they do. Usually the people with the least consequence do the most attacking. And of course, it's all about, I mean, you could say all you want, value worth in Bitcoin, just like at one point I could have said I value my worth in gold ounces. But the fact is that dollars pay the bills right now, maybe not in the future. And so it's all about risk management, as you say. I mean, right now, I believe in Bitcoin more than ever. The reasons, the things that I feared back in 2018, I don't fear now, just like the things I feared in 2016, I didn't fear in 2018. I feel stronger than ever. But it's all ultimately about your personal financial situation, and you're doing the right thing.
Well, yeah, but I did what Brad. The one thing you didn't exactly address, and I don't want to be nitpicky about this, but today there was a tweet that said you sold today.
Yeah, so
today.
at 60,
That's
at
a lot
65,
different.
at 6,500. So at around like 10,500, I was tweeting like I want to sell Bitcoin and asking for advice on Twitter, and people were telling me bad advice. So then it crashed, of course, down to 8,000, and then when it crashed, I was like, usually you get the feeling it's like, oh well, it's too late for me to sell now, and we've lived through that so much. We've lived through, oh, it's too late, I might as well keep it now. But I overrode that feeling and used like sensible trend following rules to realize the trend is going down, so I got to sell. So even though I should have sold higher, I sold at 8,000. And it was like, 10, 15, 20% of my Bitcoin over a week and a half or so. And then we crashed more on Black Thursday, they're calling it. And I bought. And I switched my Twitter name and everything. I'm like, I'm bullish now. We crashed 50% from where I tweeted that I think we're going to go down 50%. So I started buying again. And I'm not a trader. I'm just like, I thought that the circumstances changed. So I bought back some of what I sold already at like 5,500 or something like that. And then I'm following the coronavirus news, and I'm seeing the response, and I'm seeing how they cut negative interest. They cut the rates to zero, like prematurely. Like they did that way too fast. They're not leaving anything. The next thing that they have to do is shut the stock market down and just like full on socialism, pretty much. So in that scenario, I feel like Bitcoins could wick down to $3,000 or something. And I'll buy that. If we wick down to 3,000, I'm buying that. I'm not going to, we could touch 2,500. I could see.
Could I jump in here?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the most important lesson here is everyone has their own risk management. Being a hodler of last resort is about buying, not necessarily, and about holding some of your value in Bitcoin. And I personally, I think that this is really about having multiple bags and having goals and having and thinking about this, right? Because if you're overextended in Bitcoin right now and you may lose your job or you may get forward load, like you're fucked. And you never want to sell when you don't want to. You always want to be in control. So, if your goal is 6.5, and that's your hodl stash forever, do that. If your goal is 1 and that's your hodl stash forever, do that. Hold that. That is your stake in Bitcoin. Anything on top of that, you got to make sure to manage your risk so that way you stay in the game. And I think that's the most important. And, if that made you relieved of back pain and that put you in position to take advantage of the knowledge that and the business that then power to you. Right? Like I don't see why we should even care about Twitter trolls.
Well, here we go. So do you guys have anything else to add to this? It's been a very broad topic. Traditional finance, the dollar. I mean, so clearly some people are valuing the dollar right now, a lot all over the world. What is up with that? Or did you guys have anything else to add? Andy,
I would like to finish with saying
Brad,
that,
Brad, please.
That if you're watching this and you have not yet hit your target of Bitcoin, I don't think you should sell. If your target is 5% of your net worth in Bitcoin, you should just be buying dips. I'm over my target. I got into Bitcoin in 2011. I've only been selling Bitcoin pretty much for the rest of my Bitcoin career because I'm overexposed to Bitcoin. I bought Bitcoin like at certain times, yes, for sure. When I think the price is down, when the Mayer multiple's like really low or whatever, I'll buy some. I'll sell when it's high. Like, and just in general, it's not a bad idea to take some profits into fiat, even if you don't like fiat. But if you're like just coming at this now and you're really believe in Bitcoin, then I don't think that my strategy of shaving some off, and like, don't try to time the markets if you haven't yet hit your 5% or whatever your target number is. Just keep stacking. Like, that is a good idea. So we're in two different realities, and if just people need to understand if they're in conservative sort of preservation of wealth mode or stack more Bitcoin mode until you get to your target. There's different strategies there. And I'm not trying to be a trader. I'm not trying to time markets or anything like that. I just have different goals right now. I've realized that I was identifying as a Bitcoin maximalist for a long time. And I realized, like, when you really think about it, everybody is a value maximalist and like a rights maximalist and like a privacy maximalist. And
not everyone.
Like that. Well, yeah, most Bitcoiners though, you know what I mean? Like, most people are, the reason why they want Bitcoin, it's either because they want to make more money, they want to store their value, or they want like to fight against the fiat system, the central bank system, and some sort of activism, right? But like, it's all value when you peel away the layers and when you peel away the names of the assets. It's like you're protecting your family and your value. And right now, I think Bitcoin is that thing for sure. But it's everything is getting wrecked right now. So
yeah, but to say everything's getting wrecked right now, or that you think that the coronavirus news is this. Look, the market knows that the coronavirus news is bad and it's getting worse. It doesn't mean that Bitcoin will go up or down from this point on. And I'm not sure why we're talking about everyone's personal strategy at this point. Of course, if you need to sell, then sell. If you don't, but we should be talking about what Bitcoin's value is and what this crisis is likely going to do to it.
Okay. Yeah. By the way, so Christian, your shirt, the UK Bitcoin Master liked your shirt. By the way, that was just it in the chat. I don't know if you guys can see the public chat. All right, Christian, did you have something to say about what Andy just said?
No, I mean, I agree. Everyone, don't get shamed into whatever. Risk manage the way that's appropriate, and make sure that you put yourself in position to survive another day. If you put yourself in position to get wrecked, it doesn't matter how much Bitcoin you have, because you're wrecked. You're gonna have to sell it when you don't want to. So,
yeah, I don't
put yourself in position to win, and let's talk about the fundamentals.
Right.
All right. So we're going to talk about the halving right now, real quick.
Adam, you are going to talk about traditional markets in general, right?
Yeah, we're going to.
Yeah.
Before we go to halving them, Andy, what do you have to say? Do you have any? You touched on precious metals for a second there. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to talk about the traditional markets, or both?
No, precious metals. I've said all I could say. They're dead forever. You could see what they're doing. There's been very little interest in physical market. The paper market's destroyed it anyway. And the fact is that precious metals have been so usurped in value proposition. I mean, when I was, marketing them for years and owning them, I'd say, well, they're fungible, divisible, and portable, and they're outside the system. But when you look at it, you go, of course they're not. They're more in the system than anything else. They're not fungible, portable, divisible, any of those things compared to Bitcoin. I think.
What would you say to a person who's buying silver now? Because
I'd say they're insane. I had 7 safes full of silver. Getting rid of it was the most difficult thing I ever had, including a lawsuit with UPS, which I lost. And the logistics, the liquidity is dying for silver. The gold-silver ratio is exploding, showing, as I've said for years, that it no longer is monetary. And just save your money. It's a big waste of time. What I'd like to talk about more is what's going on in the financial markets.
Go ahead.
Not specifically the stock market, but the insane amount of money printing, which I predicted for years, and a lot of people in the Bitcoin community have, is just shocking to see it in reality. And for people not to understand what it's going to mean for Bitcoin in the future, let alone, as you say, with the halving coming, it's really, what have I done for a living for all these years? And I'm reading these headlines every day, like, it's just, a train wreck in slow motion that even I never could imagine seeing.
All right. Anything else you wanted to say about that? Though?
Train wreck in slow motion is right.
I'm gonna go back to me. Yeah.
All right.
Well, I got
bird out money.
Brad, you're up. Yeah.
I was tweeting about 2 weeks ago that I think the real black swan here is the central banks, not the coronavirus. And the reason why I was saying that was I was trying to think through the second orders of me selling my Bitcoin and like how Bitcoin will react to this, and what I could invest in, like when the market crashes, and 3 months from now, say when real estate comes down and everybody's on UBI checks and like they're on the silver spoon from the government because business is kind of shut down, or the economic effects are sort of like it's a tsunami. It's like waves are going to hit us. Well, what if, Andy, this is for you especially, what if we do just switch to modern monetary theory and the central banks just print our way out of this, and we just decide as a global community that debt doesn't matter anymore, and they do rebrand the national debt to the national savings, and the interest rates are so low that we can just run another 10-year bull market in the stock market, and they can save it, and everybody, and we switch to kind of like a pseudo capital or socialism, sort of not quite socialism, but a socialist democracy, say, with some free markets. Like, what if they can actually print their way out of this and it doesn't hyperinflate, and we don't get World War III, and we don't get mass rioting in the streets, we don't get any bank runs because people are switching to digital currencies anyway, so there's no cash to go, they're already asking you don't take cash out of the bank machines, and people don't even give a shit. They're just like, okay, I'll just use Interac. So what do you think, Andy, in that scenario? I know it's an edge case, and that's the black swan I'm trying to think about. What if the central banks are the black swan and they actually save this train wreck, and we just continue status quo and there's another 10-year bull market?
Well, I did just, to what you said, I tweeted an hour ago, quite a shocking chart. This is showing the stock market collapse. Proof positive of how the Fed is far more dangerous than the coronavirus, which, of course, Adam would agree with me about. What you were saying is not possible. It would be like saying, well, what if the Pope converted to Judaism? Like the things that you're proposing are not happening. What we're seeing now is the culmination of the failure that was caused by the 2008 attempt, because you could have asked this question in 2008, right? The markets are all collapsing, and then the Fed says, we're going to print, and we're going to print, and we're going to go to NERP, and we're going to go to ZERP, and we're going to do all these things. What if it works and we have another 10-year bull market? Well, it worked to create a 10-year bull market then, but back then we had the debt capacity to do it. Remember, like, for instance, the U.S. national debt was $10 trillion when the 2008 crisis hit. It's 24 right now, and that doesn't include Fannie Mae off balance sheet. And probably by the end of this year, it's going to be about 26 or 27. And the only way to service that is to have pretty much negative interest rates, which have already caused so much damage around the world. And now you have this wild card, which is going to make it impossible for money printing to even work, because businesses are going to be shutting down the very businesses they're bailing out. And that was something that even the feds can't take into account. So right now, I just think that we've had a failure of credibility in the central banks that's taken 12 years for the world to see. That's why right now the markets are collapsing no matter what they do. And I think that, the timing of Bitcoin being born in 2008 of the crisis, as a result of the crisis, and needing basically a decade to build itself up, to get a nice hash rate for people to trust it, to get rid of all the fallacies about forks, to the point where it's now a strong, sustainable blockchain that people know, even institutions know, that it's going to keep working. It's ready for the prime time. And just as this is happening, and just as the halving is happening, this is the first real halving. I mean, we're talking about going from 12 Bitcoins to 6 Bitcoins of supply per block. I mean, we're talking about a huge supply cut at a time where demand is exploding higher, as the very reason that people have got into Bitcoin and why Bitcoin were born is happening. It's almost like divine that the timing of all these things would come together at the same time. There is no way in hell that what is happening now will end with the central banks on top with credibility, markets back up, and confidence restored. We are going to see, either via hyperinflation or mass default, all of the debt that's been created from the last 12 years, and really from the last 40 years, be defaulted one way or the other. That's how it's going to be. It's just a matter of how and when. And I frankly think that because of this virus, it's going to be a lot sooner than anyone ever could have imagined.
Now, I want to go back to Brad's point real quick. Will they be able to pull it off? Is basically the question there. And as someone in the comments or in the chat said, turns out the whole world is socialist/communist, and beg for it when the S hits the fan, is what I'm finding out these past 2 weeks. And yeah, it does appear that the majority of people want the government to take care of them. So as long as people are eating, as long as people are getting free stuff from the government, I don't see how the governments of the world won't get away with printing money. I think they will be. I don't think people care if their wealth is being inflated away at a fast or a slow rate, as long as they feel like they're happy. I mean, I think we have entered MMT. I think we've entered MMT, and I think they're going to be. I think there's a way to pull it off. I know. I mean, Andy, you gave logical reasons why they, but I don't think the people will rebel. Just like Brad said, they're not in the streets now. So why would they be?
They're not in the streets yet, Adam. This crisis just started 2 weeks ago. The debts have not yet defaulted. Anyone reads Pomp, Anthony Pompliano, great stuff. Wall Street guy like myself. We're talking about we're going to be at Great Depression levels of unemployment within a month. I mean, it took 5 years back then. We've already had the stock market fall as much percentage-wise as the 29 crash, which is pretty shocking. But we're also going to have unemployment reach those levels within months. And on top of that, we may be in the house for weeks and weeks and weeks. Anyone who thinks otherwise is crazy. The only way we're going to end this is by erring on the side of caution. People are going to be inside for a long time, and all the debt that was built up all these years is going to default. I mean, you're talking about a company like Boeing may go bankrupt, right? Isn't Boeing supposed to be one of the greatest companies in the world? Because they borrowed so much money at low rates to buy back stock at high prices that they will not weather this. They won't make it for another year, Boeing. And that's just one company. Everyone is going to be defaulting. And so when they say, well, the federal and the ECB, well, they'll print it over. They are going to cause a panic out of cash like we've never seen before. There is a limit on how much debt you can have. But when it's defaulting, that's the problem. Yeah, no, everyone says, yeah, debt's fine. We can live with it. Or Dick Cheney said, our debt is your problem. The problem is when it starts defaulting, then you can no longer ignore it. And we are going to see debt defaults of every kind starting this month, like nothing ever seen in history. I mean, in history, we'll never see this much defaults.
I don't know, man.
I was going to say 100%. And once the government does stuff, they're not going to stop. It's like whatever they put in place now is not going to change, right? So if they put in place weekly or biweekly checks, if they put in place a lot of these policies, it's going to be very difficult for them to change. And I think we're living in a new world. I agree with Adam. I agree with Andy. I think we're living in a world with negative interest rates, period, forever in America. And I just don't see how that's going to change. Will they pull it off? Will they kick the can down the road a little bit longer? Maybe, but Bitcoin's here. And this is really about allocation of resources and allocation of capital in the grand scheme of things. And in a world where like everyone is socialist, checks are coming out in America and the Cantillon effect is in full force, like the allocation of resources are just, the beginning of getting fucked up is now. So is that system going to be sustainable in the long term? I don't know. It's it's scary. It's really scary.
Yeah. I mean, look at Europe, right? Where they've been socialist for some time. And Europe has had negative interest rates now for 6 years. And the whole system is falling apart. Just look, the whole Schengen agreement is falling apart right now. The cross-border thing is going to fall apart. The currency is a complete mess because all the properties that made it a currency they were violated in day one. The euro is going to fall apart as fast as a lot of these other smaller currencies because Europe is going to break apart as a result of all the cross-debt defaults, let alone if the coronavirus actually lasts, more than 3 to 6 months.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here on the side of we can weather the storm, and I'll just say, and there's two reasons why I'm thinking this, and for everybody to be aware of this, it's good to think about this. The generational effects of socialism and anti-capitalism on Gen Z is super palpable. You can talk to any Gen Z youngster, and we're at the point where there's going to be UBI checks, and if an entire generation is brought up to expect UBI checks, and they're being influenced by politicians that tell them the world is ending in 10 years if we don't give up all your freedom over your carbon emissions to us, and we'll take care of you and we'll give you checks, and you can't do this, you can't do that, and have mass surveillance on everything you spend and all that. I mean, you just think about that generation being influenced by people like AOC and politicians that are like super socialist, super anti-capitalist.
But what about
Do
the
you want-
value of those checks? I mean, who's going to finance this? You realize that they're talking about, I just read
Well,
yesterday.
in MMT,
Yeah.
there's no need for financing, right? In MMT, if they do convince everybody to switch their thinking, like it's a new,
They don't need to finance free money. They're talking about now issuing a 50-year treasury bond, right?
I'm not saying it makes
and
sense.
that the Fed will print the money to fund that. That means $1.3 trillion just for this one round of financing. And of course, someone has to own those bonds aside from the Fed. So the Fed's so you're basically saying that the Fed's going to print money and fund everything that the government does. But because generations are used to it, that they're going to be happy and there'll be no drop in the decline of the. We're talking about the change. I mean, what did I write today? A change in
Allocation of
monetary
resources.
paradigm is happening right now in front of us. It's not going to be because the government decides to print even more money and give it out that's going to help any. That value of that money is going to die.
Let's hear Brad. I think I know what Brad's going to say. Brad.
So I'm not saying that it makes any sense from I think about these things obviously from an Austrian perspective. So I have an ingrained feeling that value should be scarce, and I should allocate to scarce assets, and that's why I like Bitcoin and Keynesianism and just money printing and quantitative easing and all that is pretty much a scam in my eyes. But the alternative is a depression. So they're going to do everything they possibly can to not have rioting in the streets. The politicians and the central bankers have the value right now. And even though the money is becoming more and more valueless, they have the value and they have the control. And as long as they give the plebs the Netflix and their $1,000 a month.
No, Brett, are you watching the currency markets right now? I'm just curious. I mean, you live in Canada. You can see what the Canadian dollar is doing.
I called 2 weeks ago. I moved like majority of my money into US dollars. Because Canadian dollar is going to get destroyed.
Great. So great. Okay. But you're watching the currency markets. You realize that everyone in Canada has lost a huge amount of purchasing power in the last.
But we don't.
Look at each chart. Look at all these charts. Look at everyone. Look at I'm looking right now. Brazil,
totally
Mexico,
I think
South Africa, Japan.
It doesn't make any sense when you look at it from the perspective of us who think of things logically. But when you think about it from the perspective of the people that actually control the system, and they will be willing to do what the hell ever they can to prevent the system from falling apart.
But they still have to buy things, and the value of the currency goes down. It's that we're past the point where it's just we're going to will it to happen.
I don't think
that's what 2008 to 2000.
I don't think we are. I don't.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I'm actually flipping to agree with Andy and Brad. Sorry, to agree with Adam and Brad that it's easy to, as like Austrians, to get lulled into we're right this time. Like we've been right the entire time, but the forces against that are very powerful. And let's just not underestimate them. We'll see. We just don't know.
Most people are not rational most of the time. The dollar story, people love the dollar story. The euro might fall apart, okay? But I mean, the dollar is the top of the worst of them, okay? It's the top of the fiat land. Everybody wants a piece of the United States. Even when the whole world's falling apart, everybody wants a piece of the United States. And I think people still believe that story. I think all the welfare recipients and future welfare recipients of America, which there are a lot of apparently now, they just believe in the story, and the money printers can get away with it. There's going to be a lot more of it out there. But
90% of the population of the world doesn't use dollars. They use these collapsing currencies, and the value of the dollar is being diminished too. Every
currency is in a race to kind of destroy their own value because their debt is denominated in their currency, and they want to be able to just print more of it to pay the debt off with valueless currency over time. But it's going to have to end because this is the black swan for them that's going to expose all this insane risk and leverage. But I think there's going to be a Bretton Woods 2.0 where they just move to modern monetary theory, agree collaboratively that all of our national debts don't matter anymore. No one's going to get ever paid back all this insane.
Really, you think that the world's leaders are going to get together and decide that all the debt is going to go away and that there'll be no consequences, and they'll all agree on it? No problem.
Just their debt.
What's the other solution? It's World War III.
But that's so easy. Why haven't they thought of this already? I mean, we have a G20, right? Why hasn't the G20 gotten together and said, you know what? Why don't we just say all debt is no good anymore? It's all gone. I mean, why haven't they done that?
Because
you can't.
Because the Black Swan didn't happen.
If you owe money to people, then they want it to be paid back.
It's because of game theory between Russia, China, and the U.S. and like the we're talking physical warfare. I don't know if we want to be going to this.
No, but it's not a choice.
One thing that since this is the This Week in Bitcoin show,
you can't.
No matter what happens to the dollar, if they're able to pull this off, if the United States is able to pull, like, printing out trillions and trillions and trillions, if you're on the Bitcoin side, you're going to be in good shape. I think we can agree on that.
Because there's been 600 fiat currencies throughout history, and everyone has failed. And it's amazing to believe that people think now that this one will succeed when it's so miserably failed already. I mean, and we're just getting started. This is where the parabolic debt growth goes. I don't even know what's the word after parabolic. Hyper-parabolic?
But that's on the assumption that the debt matters. And if we switch to they all switch to say, okay, we're now moving to, it's not national debt, it's national savings. And
what? I don't even get that. That makes no sense.
That's what they're trying to say. I'm not telling you that this is what I think is a smart idea.
Okay.
That's what the modern monetary theory economists.
I never heard of that, but okay.
Look it up. Stephanie Kellman, I think, is the one that.
Never heard of Stephanie Kellman.
No, I've heard of her.
Okay.
I've heard of them. These MMT people, they're gonna. For me, it doesn't matter. I'm in the Bitcoin. If the dollar's going to go to whatever, then let it go bad. If it goes semi-bad, I mean, that's what it seems like we're arguing over. Is it going to be hyperinflation or is it going to be inflation? I mean,
Stephanie Kelton. Sorry, Kelton.
So okay, Chris, did you have something else to add to this whole thing before we tie up this this part of the conversation here? Oh wait, you're muted, man.
You're muted.
I just can't believe that all of this circus is happening and no one's even mentioned the fact that the US elections is currently in progress. Holy shit. This swirl of Corona plus elections plus Bitcoin halving, 2020 is a fucking whirlwind of a year.
No curses, please.
It literally just got started. Sorry, and I apologize, but it is an absolutely insane whirlwind of a year. And it's March. It's March.
Well, think about it, because pretty much the only way Trump is gonna win is if somehow this resolves, and if he doesn't, I can't even imagine what's going to come after that, because then you'll get the real socialism coming in, and then the real money printing is
hashtag Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I don't even know what Bernie Sanders is, 80 years old, but it'll be really scary if the socialist side comes in and says we want to take over everything, because that's what's next.
All right, let's talk.
You see, Trump's already talking, because we were talking about Boeing. Just Boeing took down their massive line of credit for $15 billion or something like that. Now they're asking for a $60 billion bailout, and Trump's even suggesting that this time around, if they start bailing companies out, then the government should own them. So that's the government nationalizing the means of production, kind of, right?
Statism to its worst. All right, but let's talk about the halving, though. Something that's happening.
If they're going to bail out companies, why not have it that the citizens get some benefit from that instead of the central bankers and the private bankers? I would rather, if we're going to be printing $20 trillion, I would rather bail out the poor people that are homeless on the streets than the central bankers that are just, have to fly to the private island to escape coronavirus. Do you know what I mean? How can you not?
That's
what the $2,000 checks are for.
Yeah, that's what they're proposing, $1,200 checks or something like that. I mean, everyone's going to get a piece of the dollar pie. Everyone's going to get their bailout. Everyone will get something out of this darn thing, and everyone gets used to it. That's what everyone wants something for free. The Boeing wants something for free. The guy on the street everybody wants something for free, and they're going to get it. They're going to get it. That's what and Andy says, because they're all going to get it, it's being printed to oblivion. But if we're saying that they're going to be able to pull it off somehow, we'll see how it goes.
In both scenarios, Bitcoin gains, I think. And I think,
yes,
Andy, we're on the same page there.
Yes.
In both scenarios, if they pull it off and if they don't pull it off, people are going to flock to scarce value, and obviously Bitcoin is one of the most scarce resources on the planet.
Okay, yeah. This is the thing to keep in mind. Both scenarios are insane. Just both scenarios in terms of the dollar insane. And there are going to be sane people. Where are the 20%ers going to go? What's left? Bitcoin. Bitcoin is left. But
everything too, like land, gold, Bitcoin, art. There's lots of things.
Land, they can tax to oblivion. Land can be taken away. Gold can be taken away. Bitcoin is unconfiscatable right there.
Yeah. Look, if you have hyperinflation or collapsing currency, that doesn't mean that art is going to go up in value. I mean, art doesn't really have an intrinsic value. It's just how much money people are willing to pay for it. The one thing that, of course, is going to do well in that scenario is going to be Bitcoin. And, you would think that gold would, even though I think it's on its way out as a monetary standard. But everything else, I mean, who knows? Because the circumstances of high inflation are very unpredictable, and most of them are very bad. I mean, very few assets do well in that kind of environment. But I don't even know if that will happen. It could be a deflationary spiral too. But the fact is that, I think what we're seeing right now is that, what I've been talking about for years and years is this experiment that started in 1971 of having every currency backed by nothing is failing. I mean, it's great that they created technology to prolong it, like with all these great manipulative algorithms to control markets, and then of course printing money and NERP and ZERP and all this stuff. But I mean, everything they do is failing, and what we're seeing right now is the act of God, the coronavirus, that is striking down their abilities to keep it going. I mean, the debt defaults. The debt defaults that are going to occur in the next few months are going to be staggering, and they're not going to just be small companies. They're going to be giant companies. They're going to be wealthy investors. They're going to be some of the most well-known institutions in the world. It's kind of like when you see the coronavirus, when you see famous people get it, even if they're just infected, not necessarily sick, you're going to see you're going to see major institutions, including central banks, go bankrupt because of this. If it doesn't end soon, I don't think it'll end soon. If it ends soon, perhaps somehow by the skin of their teeth, somehow this gets prolonged a little bit. But to me, it looks like this is going to go on for some time.
So what now? We're in this era of companies are going to be going out of business or getting big checks, and at the same time, the Bitcoin halving is going to be going on. How many people are actually going to wake up to the Bitcoin halving? What do you guys predict for the Bitcoin halving in terms of the current situation? Because the situation has changed. Are people going to start talking about the Bitcoin halving? It seems like all anybody wants to talk about is what famous basketball player got the virus and stuff, and the stock market crashing, all these negative things. Christian.
I think most people in the world are not going to give a shit about the Bitcoin halving because it's not going to be relevant to them quite yet. I think Bitcoiners are going to be following it. But ultimately, I think the most bullish thing for Bitcoin is that pretty much everything is affected by this virus on a fundamental level, including the majority of altcoins that need to continue development in order to surpass Bitcoin in the future. But Bitcoin's halving and Bitcoin in general on a fundamental level is essentially completely uninterrupted. If the price can hold and there's not too much turbulence on the miner side of things, there are very few issues. Granted, the halving is going to force a lot more efficiency. Like, I think people don't understand how efficient Bitcoin miners can get, and I think there's a lot of room for gained efficiency. So I think that after the halving, there will be a hit on those who are running tight margins, but generally speaking, people will continue to drive towards being more and more efficient so that way they can get Bitcoin at a cheaper price. And we're already seeing it today that, energy facilities are mining Bitcoin. If you think about those facilities, their price for electricity is actually negative. If they don't use it and they waste it, they're actually losing money. So that puts them in a completely new ballpark. Like, we're not talking about 2 cents a kilowatt or, 2 cents a kilowatt hour. We're talking about negative cents. Like, we're talking about unlocking potential revenue for energy production facilities that was never even possible because of Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. So that's the next step of Bitcoin. I think that this halving just continues Bitcoin's march towards that, becoming, this kind of energy behemoth and this financial monster. And Bitcoin is anti-fragile and everything else is fragile. And we're going to see that the halving happens, and we have no idea when ETH2, we have no idea when any of this other stuff, but we do know what Bitcoin is going to do.
All right, Brad. Brad actually had some pretty bad predictions for Ethereum and DeFi. I don't know if you want to mention that briefly, but what are your halving thoughts?
I think that coronavirus has taken over everything, and any narrative before for Bitcoin is just irrelevant right now. And the halving is just this niche sort of like event at the moment. Like the coronavirus is going to destroy confidence in people's trust in markets and stuff like that for a little bit. So I think it's going to be like six months to a year before Bitcoin comes back out of this, when it decouples from the markets and when it decouples from gold and things like that. And eventually I think Bitcoin's 100K probably within 3 years. I think 1 million within 10 years. But if they hyperinflate the currency, obviously we get $1 million in a year, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying if they don't do that. But I do think Bitcoin is like medium to long term the play, but short term I think we could see much lower. And if you're like sold on the Bitcoin halving like narrative that it's going to moon because everybody's going to want to get some because of the stock to flow ratio, I just think like we're in a new world right now, and you got to just take less risk. Don't use leverage if you're going to trade that strategy. Just be cautious. Learn about trend following. Learn about portfolio management, and just be cautious because previous narratives are not relevant right now.
And Andy, has Bitcoin
and ETH, ETH $50 DeFi wrecked.
Andy, has Bitcoin decoupled from the traditional markets, and what do you think about the halving?
Yeah, well, I have to say I disagree with pretty much everything I just heard there. Well, first of all, if you just sold your Bitcoin and you're saying that I'd like to buy it back at 2,000 or 3,000, of course your narrative is going to change, especially when you just told us that you have pits in your stomach about the price going up. So now it becomes, I think it's going to go down. Okay, listen. To say that coronavirus affects everything and that everything is the same and that Bitcoin is just the same and everyone will lose confidence in Bitcoin because of coronavirus, I think is ridiculous. First of all, it's still trading at a very nice level, levels that we couldn't have imagined it trading at years ago. So to say everyone's lost confidence in it, what I meant
was they're going to lose confidence in markets in general, and they're going to want to be in cash.
Okay, well maybe some people won't want to be in cash because the people some people need cash and some people would like to have Bitcoin, and some people, and again, Bitcoin, like I said, most of the selling that's going to occur is probably already occurred. And we're talking about most of Bitcoin is held by hodlers. That's what the evidence says.
2 weeks. Within a week, I think we'll know if that's true.
Okay, maybe so, but I'm hearing
too much. The hospital system in New York City in a week. Yes. We'll see how
you have a lot of predictions. I get it. You predict everything, and that's what you do. You write predictions, and maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Tone Vays makes thousands of predictions, and he's very good. He's very good at expertly saying, "Look, I predicted this one who was right, but that one that I did that was wrong. Forget that one." Look, I don't. I'm not saying whether Bitcoin goes up. You just said coronavirus affects everything, and everyone will lose confidence in it, and that the niche is just. The halving is just a niche, like it's some inconsequential thing. Look, we've already had most of the Bitcoin that's going to be produced. There's about 18.3 million out there. In the next 4 years, there's just going to be another 1.3 million. This is nothing. This is chump change. We've essentially reached the limit of all the Bitcoin that's going to be ever produced at a time where people are finally starting to understand what it is and that it's not going away. And that just because, oh my God, people are scared because of markets, well, that means Bitcoin will collapse. Everyone who has any idea about Bitcoin knows it's not going to collapse, and they're going to be looking to store value. Now, it'd be one thing if Bitcoin was trading at like a $10 trillion market cap and it had so much to come out of it. It's trading at a very small level. And the fact is, look at how it's done in the past week. To say like, oh, the coronavirus and it's falling with markets. No, in this past week, Bitcoin is up while markets have crashed. So obviously, there's been some people that have thought maybe there's value in here. And to say, to me, I think the halving is one of the biggest events ever. Look, I was around for the last halving. No one even knew about it except for hardcore Bitcoiners. Now, the institutions are very well aware of what it means. And of course, it's going to cause the price of mining to go up. So even if there are energy companies that are mining it, the fact is the price of mining goes up dramatically when you're cutting the supply in half. So I think that right now is the perfect storm. Now, of course, it could go down. But when you see that big drop and you see that most of it was short-term coins and most of it was because of leverage on BitMEX, that is not going to happen again. They're not going to be taking these big long positions. I think you're talking about a golden period of risk reward for Bitcoin that we've never seen before. And yes, I'm not predicting that it's going to go up to 20,000 or down
so many times in the last 2 years. I don't think it's as I think it's
okay. But you also believe that the governments of the world can just get together and say debt doesn't matter. So we'll see.
They could.
Christian.
Hey,
turn.
they. So it's funny because I feel like I'm right in between you guys. Like I think that Brad is a lot more bearish than I am, and I think Andy is. I think you're way too bullish. I think that we have no idea what's on the table. I think everything is on the table. I think the governments are going to try their best to save what they're doing. All the incentives are pushing them in that direction. And then on the flip side, we have no idea how strong the hands that are holding right now are. We have no idea what another 2 or 3 months is going to look like and how sweet selling Bitcoin might sound then. Like I could see a world where Bitcoin gets to 8K and a lot of people sell just because, holy shit, that's my rent for 2 or 3 or 4 months. That could really help me out.
That's very sound.
We have really no idea what this is going to look like, especially during this time of extreme uncertainty, and we have no idea when that's going to end.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think that's very sound analysis, what you just said, because yes, of course it could fall a lot more because you never know what'll happen in the short term. And of course it could go up a lot because you never know what'll happen in the short term. I just disagree that Bitcoin is in the same boat as everything in the world as regards the coronavirus. Bitcoin is not a business. It's not a business that its outlook gets worse because of the coronavirus. It doesn't have debt to pay off. It's not a company. It doesn't have centralized people who can take it away. It's just going to be there. And it has a very low market cap to start with. So yes, of course it could go down. But I would say that to underestimate its impact on the world and the impact of the halving would be unwise. But yes.
And I just want to drill down a little bit, as I think one of the basic disagreements is that, Brad, you still think Bitcoin is correlated with the traditional assets because things are so bad that everything will go down if things go down. And Andy, you're saying Bitcoin is not correlated with these assets. That
it's never been correlated with the look at the last few days. Bitcoin, the last week, Bitcoin has gone up and the markets have gone down.
Well, but people just point to that big day of the crash. Everything crashed on that one day.
Well, it's not that day. I mean, I've been noticing since at least 2 years now that Bitcoin is macro correlated to world news, and it's been uncorrelated as like a portfolio weighting tool to other assets, but in macro correlations, it's totally correlated. It's very correlated.
So the world news peaked on a bullish nature in December of 2017, and then it peaked again in June of 2019, and then it peaked again last month. No, I mean I've been watching every market for 25 plus years.
Remember when the stock markets were kind of like looking like everybody was calling for a recession, and then Bitcoin started to go down with the stock markets, and then when the stock market started to go back up, just like how altcoins can move when Bitcoin is bullish, Bitcoin can move when the traditional markets are safe.
The traditional markets are 100% supported by the central banks 24/7. They have been since 2008. That's why they never go down, stocks or bonds. That's why this completely shocked them. This is a Six Sigma event, an act of God that comes in and shakes the foundations of what they're able to do. They are no longer able to support the markets, and then you see everything come crashing down. That's all. It doesn't mean it's going to stay that way forever. In fact, in Bitcoin's case, we all know that BitMEX's leverage is the biggest reason why it fell so much. I mean, why people would go on to such incredible leverage, and what the most volatile asset I've ever seen in my life is, I don't know, but that was why. And it was heavily correlated for a couple of days. And now it's back to doing whatever it wants to do. It crashes, it surges, but it's not necessarily paying attention to anything else. I mean, Adam, all you guys, you watch Bitcoin. When has it ever moved when the markets move? When does it ever?
Well, the other day,
Yeah.
I don't believe in the correlated. I don't believe in the correlated hypothesis. I think it's uncorrelated. It does its own thing. But people that one day, everyone's so darn panic stricken now. It's ridiculous. And when they saw that happen that one day, when everything went down, everyone's screaming, it's correlated now. It's correlated. Look, even Bitcoin can't survive. First of all, dudes, I mean, the other day, the stock market crashed again, and Bitcoin did not crash. So
how about today? How about today?
Today, yes, same thing.
That's the same argument. That's the same argument though that altcoiners make when they say, "See, look, Litecoin is leading Bitcoin when it goes up 10%, or Dash is leading Bitcoin, it goes up 20%, and then Bitcoin can go up." It's macro correlated.
Yeah, but that's ridiculous. Bitcoin and Dash do not lead Bitcoin. Litecoin and Dash are inconsequential.
Exactly.
And
so that's why I don't think that. I think in a general macro sense that if the world is in a bullish, expanding market, then Bitcoin has lots more room to expand. If the world is shrinking, everybody's in fear mode, everybody's panicking and selling, then they're going to fly and sell everything, including Bitcoin. And once we get out of that stressful period of fear and crashing, then Bitcoin can decouple and it can lift off.
You're reading the mainstream playbook. That's what the mainstream tells you. You should say.
I don't read any of that stuff.
People say, "Well, look, Bitcoin only goes up when the markets go up, and Bitcoin's only been around in a bull market, so therefore it hasn't been." Yeah, that's right. It's only been around a bull market. So let's see how it does.
The reality is that you're both right.
I mean, I'm not following anybody's lead on this. I'm just taking it in from all sources.
All right, let Christian speak.
Yeah, the reality is that you guys are both right. I think that in the short term, Brad's uncertainty is completely correct, and that can have massive effects on Bitcoin. But I do agree with Andy and Adam that there are fundamental things with Bitcoin that will lead to price appreciation, and ultimately that will signal to the market as they continue to get their measly little check from the government that's buying them $20 cans of beans. They're going to be looking at Bitcoin just continue to go up because of the fundamentals, because no one is selling. It's going to be very uncertain. And Brad is saying this, that when we get out of this time, Bitcoin will surge. I don't think that we need to necessarily get out of this time for Bitcoin to surge. But if it will surge, it will because of the fundamentals. It will because hodlers are holding the floor. They're not selling. And recently I've been checking out BISC a lot, and I think it gives you a good sense of what Bitcoiners only are thinking. And if you look at BISC, there is a 30 to 35% premium on Bitcoin buys, and there is a massive buy wall. So that is what Bitcoiners are thinking. I think that is a beautiful signal. So, we'll see. We're going to be tested, and we're going to see where the Bitcoiners lay and where the strong hands lay, and how long the strong hands can hold on, because this might be a crazy roller coaster.
Yes. All right. I think that's a good way to tie up that part of the discussion. Brad, I've been talking about Brad's article for a while, the windfall game survey that you did. Can you quickly give a summary of that and a conclusion? Because I think the conclusion is people need education on Bitcoin.
Yes.
But keep going.
And like I have a podcast episode I've been meaning to release, but I've just been following all this coronavirus stuff and trying to prep my portfolio for it for a while. I didn't release it, but thank you for covering that on your show. That was great. And I did this survey that Ron Paul puts on his Twitter every year for the last 3 years. He says if someone wealthy gifts you $10,000, but the catch is you have to keep it in this asset of your choice for 10 years, what would you choose? Cash, Bitcoin, gold? And he says bonds, but I changed it to stocks because I got feedback that bonds is too boring for everybody, and nobody understands bonds, and stocks is like people are aware of that. So I wrote this 17-question survey that kind of asks general people how they think about money, how they think money is created, how they think the stock market has performed, how they think the dollar has performed over the last 100 years. And, the common Bitcoin rabbit hole questions that you always end up asking somebody, like, what do you think money's backed by and all that. So we wrote the survey, got a bunch of feedback, and then commissioned a market research company to do it for me. And the results were great. It showed early on, obviously, people were choosing things like cash and stocks and gold. Bitcoin was the least chosen. And then afterwards, at the end, I asked the question again, and after all the education, I asked the question again to ask them, okay, now that you know all this information, what would you choose in the same scenario, and lay the scenario out again. And Bitcoin was the one that everybody chose the majority of the time at the end. So it was like some shocking things that I learned from the survey were boomers actually were the least likely to choose Bitcoin at the beginning, and then they were the most likely to change their minds at the end. And that kind of went counter to the drop gold narrative and all that we hear, which is like boomers are like a lost generation for Bitcoin. But it actually was very promising for me to see that, like, actually the boomers, we don't have to just wait for the $68 trillion wealth transfer event to happen from boomers to Gen X and millennials. We can help the boomers along and get them exposed to Bitcoin now with some education, because everybody changed their mind. All generations, all income classes, everybody changed their mind when they got educated on Bitcoin. But boomers were the significant, like, they were the ones that changed the most. But still, in the end, boomers were the least likely to buy Bitcoin. Even though they changed their mind the most, it was still millennials and Gen Z, like you'd expect, that were most interested in Bitcoin, and they choose Bitcoin. So there was some other really interesting findings in there too, but I don't want to take up too much time on that.
Well, again, so market Bitcoin, educate people about Bitcoin. It makes a difference, correct?
It was like a 300% increase in the boomers. Like there was 370% increase of boomers that would choose Bitcoin after they learned about Bitcoin, because they thought, one of the more surprising things was, like, they thought they knew about Bitcoin. A lot of them thought that they knew about Bitcoin, they knew about the national debt. And the survey proved that a lot of people are very confident in thinking they know who makes the money and they know what Bitcoin is. And like Andy was saying, like, it's such a small market cap right now. A lot of the people thought Bitcoin was already the same size market cap of gold. So in the survey, we asked them that question that Andy was saying, like, do you understand how small Bitcoin is relative to other asset classes? And people said, oh yeah, I understand. And then we would ask them, what do you think? It's 100 billion? Do you think it's 1 trillion? Do you think it's 8 trillion, just like gold? And a lot of people, like the majority of people, were choosing numbers like 10 trillion and stuff like that. So the majority of them didn't even, like, they thought they knew how much Bitcoin was worth. They thought they missed the boat already. And then when they were told that actually it's only like 100 billion, 150 billion at the time of the writing, it's only like 150 billion. Do you think it could ever go 50x to get the same price of gold? And the majority of the people answered yes. Like, so it kind of showed that people were shifting in their mindset, like, oh, maybe I don't know so much about money and investing, and this Bitcoin thing is undervalued. And,
well, the thing,
anyway,
I mean, it's a great study, and it's an amazing conclusion. Actually, if you just think about the age groups, like I was talking about at Precious Metals, I left 3 years ago. My average client was probably 65 years old then. And I assure you that age is not going down. So what you're going to see, of course, is people who own precious metals are going to be passing away, and they're going to be leaving them to millennials and Gen Zs who are going to sell them. So there's going to be a constant sell pressure for decades to come. Boomers, all they know is stocks and bonds. Probably almost none own Bitcoin, and probably very little of them even own gold, except for the older ones. And, now they're going to start to have questions about stocks and bonds because they've been supported forever. In fact, most of them lost a huge amount of money and are barely trying to claw their way back from the 2008 and 2000 declines, only to see this, which is just as bad, if not worse. So they're going to start to change their views about asset classes. And, again, we talk about bonds. Treasury bonds may be soaring, but other bonds are crashing. The bonds of actual companies that can't buy back their bonds by printing money. So I think the attitude of all kinds of boomer investors about traditional investments is going to change. And of course, you have millennials and Gen Zs who have less money to start with, and they've not lost as much in stocks and bonds. And stocks and bonds are really on their way out, I think, as capital formation tools. And they're tech savvy, so they're going to be looking to Bitcoin and a digital economy. So I just think that the shift away from traditional investments in so many ways, let alone from fiat currencies, which are just being decimated and people are losing confidence in them, is going to be historic. And when you look at the crypto sector, whether you like altcoins or not, it doesn't matter. The sector is so tiny, and there's going to be just trillions that are going to be entering the sector. Most of it should go into Bitcoin, but it's probably going to go into other places as well. A lot of it which hasn't been invented yet. Yeah.
In the survey, we saw that all the answers that changed from the beginning to the end, it didn't come from gold. It came from cash and stocks. So gold held steady at the beginning at 20% and at the end at 20%. But it was like stocks and cash. Everybody dumped that for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and the 20% are going to be people who are in their 60s plus, and those people are not going to be on the survey if you use those
They're
same
just stuck
people.
in their ways anyways,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's also going to be governments. I think it's going to be hard to ignore gold's lending. It's especially in the medium term, but long term, I definitely think that
We
both
lost
are
you there.
relevant.
Did you say
Yeah,
hard to
yeah. What did you
ignore
say,
gold
Christian? You
lending
got
effect?
cut off there. What did you say?
Sorry. I think it's hard to ignore gold's Lindy and liquidity and USD's liquidity. I feel like both of those factors are not going to disappear anytime, especially in the short to medium term. But yeah, outside of that, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything.
Yes, the institutional gold mark gold does have a legacy value, and it is still held by big institutions. So yes, it will be around for a while, and certainly if we have a crisis, it could have a bigger value. Silver's another story. No one holds silver, certainly no institutions do. But that value over time is going to diminish as the digital economy grows. And as for
Over
small,
time.
the difference is for big institutions, gold is liquid, mostly because they're not actually trading physical gold. They're trading paper promises of physical gold that we don't even know exists. Like, for instance, the U.S. government could say, yeah, we're going to sell you some of our gold, but you can't audit it. But as for the small investor, I'm saying it's become less and less liquid because just look at the sales of physical gold to retail. It's dying. And so there'll be less bullion dealers and less liquidity for small investors. It's really just institutions, governments gold will be around for some time, but it's never going to moon. Those days are past. They ended in 1980.
Okay, I want to stress to everyone again, Brad's article survey, it is linked to below. Check it out. This is actually a professional survey. It isn't just some Twitter thing, that's biased. It was scientific. I mean, it was a real sample size, all that stuff. He paid money for it. Not some Twitter thing. And it's very educational. You can really just dive down into it if you like the statistics. So I'm glad I got Brad to explain. He did a very good job there. All right, now, we've obviously we've gone overtime here. This is like the Ravens against Denver in that famous Mile High Miracle. Pound that like.
Are you kidding me?
You're out there right now in Denver, but I had to give those guys a little bit of. They're big Joe Flacco fans.
I know Jacoby Jones. I know.
All right, so what a night that was. So let us get into conclusionary thoughts, but I have a specific conclusionary thought for Christian. You're partying tonight, baby, and it's linked to below. Explain to everybody what the party is tonight, and then you can talk about anything you want to talk about. Unmute.
Sorry. I do a show called POV Crypto, and we've been doing a lot of live streams recently, and we are going to be doing a live stream where we give out the Zoom link to a bunch of people that follow us and listen to the show. And just kind of drink and hang out and talk about stuff on Zoom. So we'll be live streaming and hanging out in Zoom with a bunch of people tonight, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central. Yeah. I'm the Bitcoin guy on POV.
He's POV.
Yes.
Look at that. We best guest in the freaking space here, baby. Pound that like button. I got all sorts here. All right. What else do you want to talk about, Christian? Anything else? Well, I mean, what's up with I don't want to get into the sad things because all the businesses are shut down in like the most technologically sophisticated part of the country where you are in the San Francisco Bay Area. I don't know if you have any commentary on that, but anything you want to say, the floor is yours.
The internet is really slow, as you can see from my video feed and the quality of, just everyone is working from home. Everyone is in my neighborhood and high bandwidth. Everyone's watching Netflix. So I don't know. It's tough. No one's out. I kind of went on a run, like I said earlier this week. I never saw more people running before. So the people that do like to work out, like that's one of the few things that they can do. But it's weird. I can look at the freeway from my apartment and there's much fewer cars. Like it's like sometimes you can wait like a couple minutes and you don't see a single car. Like this is right next to downtown San Francisco. It's crazy. So I mean, I don't even think it's like that at 2 a.m.
Christian is linked to below, people. So listen to the podcast, party with him tonight. If you're not celebrating Shabbat, like some maybe. So let us go to Brad here. What are your conclusionary thoughts? Anything you wanted to add? Talk about your podcast, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, my podcast is Magic Internet Money. It's a Bitcoin podcast. I do some shows with like some comedians, and we have episodes on like Trump and the coronavirus. Sometimes I talk about random stuff, but I got to get back into it here. I've been just neck deep in this COVID-19 stuff for the last 2-3 weeks, and I just want to urge everybody that is taking too much risk to take some risk off the table and just be ready. If I'm wrong about this and the next 3 weeks are not like as bad as I think it's going to be, then you may have lost a little bit of money on a rise, but you know, you didn't lose a lot either. I just think that, like, I'm, regardless of my thoughts on the halving and all this stuff, I'm still, majority of my net worth is in Bitcoin. So even though I'm like not going to sell my cold storage coins, even if it goes to like $1,000, I sold myself down to a position that I feel like less back pain, and that those coins were like, maybe I was overexposed, and I feel a little bit better about my decision. So I'm just thinking, like, if there's anyone out listening, maybe most people listening are just in their still stacking phase, and they're still trying to get to their total portfolio allocation and like their dollar cost averaging in, and like that's the smart move. But for people who are already overexposed to Bitcoin, we just saw Adaptive Capital blew up this week. We saw a lot of people get blown up the last last week or so, and I think there's going to be a lot more volatility coming. So people just be careful, like with your stops, be careful with your risk, be careful with margin, and just your overall portfolio allocation. It's not a bad time to be in cash and wait out all this volatility. And if you were wrong, like you're going to sleep better if you were right. And then if you were wrong and the trend reverses, just get back in. Just to make slow movements, like slow buy, slow sell, and don't develop bad habits. Like if you're going to YOLO bet, I lost a lot of money the night Mt. Gox blew up because I YOLO bet on that, and it taught me a big lesson. And like losing a lot of money sucks. It's happened a bunch of times to me in crypto, and as an entrepreneur before that. So mindset's important. Like have a support network, develop a good support network, develop a good trusted circle of people that you can talk to about your decisions, and just don't get in the echo chamber. Like the echo chamber is not good for you. It's not good for your financial health.
All right. And remember, link to below, all these dudes. Andy, I'll let you have the final word.
Oh, and pound that like button.
Pound it!
Yeah. The first thing I would say is do not listen to anyone's predictions. Like you brought up Adaptive Capital. I'm just smirking a bit. These are some of the people who are among the most high and mighty in the Bitcoin maximalist community and the Bitcoin technical community, who have derided others for not listening to them. And it looks like their fund in less than a year is bankrupt, despite the fact that everyone thinks that they're such geniuses. No, you have to make your own decisions, like Brad said, and you decide on how much you invest anywhere into anything, including Bitcoin, and don't let anyone tell you what to do. Now, as for my conclusionary thought about where the world is going, I am not a Armageddonist. I think I was way back when. I think Bitcoin has changed that. It's enabled me to be more positive than I've ever been about the outlook for humanity. But what we are dealing with right now is what I have been talking about for 20 years, which is the end of the fiat currency system. I'm not saying it's going to end in a day, but it's pretty clear to anyone with a brain, and I'm talking about the people, the smart money of the world, that the fiat currency system is dying. That right now what is going on with the central banks and the governments is proving that this can't go on any longer, and the debt defaults are going to prove it. I would hope that the coronavirus ends sooner rather than later. I would doubt it, because I think that personally, I'm going to err on the side of caution. I think the world is going to do that. So this is going to be with us for a long time. And as a result, you're going to see everything the governments try to do fail. So you have to decide what you want to do with your money. And to me, like I said before, I think this is the perfect, almost divine storm where Bitcoin was created for this very purpose. So to believe that there's much downside here, and I'm not talking about short term, it goes down a little here, maybe a few $1,000s there. I'm talking about the risk reward in Bitcoin. more than any time in its history, certainly in the 5 or 6 years that I've been in it, is better than ever. And that you really should consider, if you don't have any, to get some now, because I think there's going to be enormous amounts of asset devaluation for years to come because of what's going on now.
All right. Don't be a no coiner, people.
Stack the dips.
All right, dudes. Well, thank you. That was a show. It flew by, and it was a half hour longer. Again, it went into double overtime there. You know I like those double overtime games in Denver, baby. All right. So remember, I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. I am totally calm, dude, man. I'm not worried about anything. I got long-term thinking. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Pound that like button. And no state, no government, no one can scare me. I'm going to synagogue tomorrow, baby. You better believe it. So you get a new show here every day. Tomorrow night, I will be here. Visit Christian's show tonight if you're a Friday night partier or whatever. But dudes, spread the word. Twitter, TechBalt, TechBalt. But guys, do not panic. Just, dude, I'm loving it. Watch my shows from the dudes that want to hear different views about all this, that don't want to hear scary stuff. Watch the last few shows I did. They were a lot of fun. All right, dudes, everybody have a great weekend, and have fun with the family and friends. Thanks a lot, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.
Later.